Hello, Squirrel Squad! Since I didn't get to read yesterday, I thought I would read a second time today, which I think I said before. This hat popping up on my head. Yeah, I took my hoodie off. I was getting hot. Still with the piggy tail. It's still. I didn't even comb my hair today. Been one of those days again. No earrings. A leaf in my hat where I dropped my hat going to get the mail. Good grief. Okay. As the word brotherly passed through his mind in one of these reveries, he smiled and glanced up at the picture of Mozart that was before him. Well, he was a great man. And when he couldn't have one sister, he took the other and was happy. Laurie did not utter the words, but he thought them, and the next instant kissed the little old ring, saying to himself, "No, I won't. I haven't forgotten. I never can. I'll try again, and if that fails, why then..." Leaving his sentence unfinished, he seized pen and paper and wrote to Jo, telling her that he could not settle to anything while there was the least hope of her changing her mind. Couldn't she? Wouldn't she? Couldn't she, wouldn't she? And let him come home and be happy? While waiting for an answer, he did nothing. But he did it energetically, for he was in a fever of impatience. It came at last and settled his mind effectually on one point, for Jo decidedly couldn't and wouldn't. She was wrapped up in Beth and never wished to hear the word love again. Then she begged him to be happy with somebody else, but always to keep a little corner of his heart for his loving sister Jo. In a postscript, she desired him not to tell Amy that Beth was worse. She was coming home in the spring, and there was no need of saddening the remainder of her stay. That would be time enough, please God, but Laurie must write to her often and not let her feel lonely, homesick, or anxious. "So I will at once." Poor little girl, it will be a sad going home for her, I'm afraid. And Laurie opened his desk as if writing to Amy had been the proper conclusion of the sentence left unfinished some weeks before. But he did not write the letter that day, for as he was rummaging out his best paper, he came across something which changed his purpose. Tumbling about in one part of the desk among bills, passports, and business documents of various kinds were several of Jo's letters, and in another compartment were 3 notes from Amy, carefully tied up with one of her blue ribbons and sweetly suggestive of the little dead roses put away inside. With a half-repentant, half-amused expression, Laurie gathered up all Jo's letters, smoothed, folded, and put them neatly into a small drawer of the desk. Stood a minute, turning the ring thoughtfully on his finger, then slowly drew it off, laid it with the letters, locked the drawer, and went out to hear High Mass at St. Stephen's, feeling as if there had been a funeral. And though not overwhelmed with affliction, this seemed a more proper way to spend the rest of the day than in writing letters to charming young ladies. The letter went very soon, however, and was promptly answered, for Amy was homesick, and confessed it in the most delightfully confiding manner. The correspondence flourished famously, and letters flew to and fro with unfailing regularity. All through the early spring, Laurie sold his bus, made elements of his opera, and went back to Paris, hoping somebody would arrive before long. He wanted desperately to go to Nice, but would not till he was asked, and Amy would not ask him, for just then she was having little experiences of her own, which made her rather wish to avoid the quizzical eyes of our dear boy. Fred Vaughn had returned and put the question to which she had once decided to answer, "Yes, thank you." But now she said, "No, thank you," kindly but steadily, for when the time came, her courage failed her and she found that something more than money and position was needed to satisfy the new longing that filled her heart, so full of tender hopes and fears. The words, "Fred is a good fellow, but not at all the man I fancied you would ever like," and Laurie's face, when he uttered them, kept returning to her as tenaciously as her own did. When she said, "And look, if not in words, I shall marry for money," it troubled her to remember that now. She wished she could take it back. It sounded so unwomanly. She didn't want Laurie to think her a heartless, worldly creature. She didn't care to be a queen of society now half so much as she did to be a lovable woman. She was so glad he didn't hate her for the dreadful things she had said, but took them so beautifully and was kinder than ever. His letters were such a comfort, for the home letters were very irregular and were not half so satisfactory as his when they did come. It was not only a pleasure but a duty to answer them, for the poor fellow was forlorn and needed petting, since Joe persisted in being stony-hearted. She ought to have made an effort and tried to love him. It couldn't be very hard. Many people would be proud and glad to have such a dear boy care for them. But Joe never would act like other girls, so there was nothing to do but be very kind and treat him like a brother. If all brothers were treated as well as Laurie was at this period, they would be a much happier race of beings than they are. Amy never lectured now. She asked his opinion on all subjects. She was interested in everything he did, made charming little presents for him, and sent him 2 letters a week full of lively gossip, sisterly confidences, and captivating sketches of the lovely scenes about her. As few brothers are complimented by having their letters carried about in their sisters' pockets, read and reread diligently, cried over when short, kissed when long, and treasured carefully. We will not hint that Amy did any of these fond and foolish things, but she certainly did grow a little pale and pensive that spring, lost much of her relish for society, and went out sketching alone a good deal. She never had much to show when she came home, but was studying nature, I dare say, while she sat for hours with her hands folded on the terrace at Valrosa, or absently sketched any fancy that occurred to her. If you hear crazy noises, it's my washing machine. A stalwart knight carved on a tomb, a young man asleep in the grass with his hat over his eyes, or a curly-haired girl in gorgeous array promenading down a ballroom on the arm of a tall gentleman, both faces being left a blur according to the last fashion in art, which was safe but not altogether satisfactory. Her aunt thought that she regretted her answer to Fred, and finding denials useless and explanations impossible, Amy left her to think what she liked, taking care that Laurie should know that Fred had gone to Egypt. That was all, but he understood it, and looked relieved as he said to himself with a venerable air, "I was sure she would think better of it. Poor old fella, I've been through it all, and I can sympathize." With that, he heaved a great sigh, and then, as if he had discharged his duty to the past, put his feet up on the sofa and enjoyed Amy's letters luxuriously. While these changes were going on abroad, trouble had come at home, but the letter telling that Beth was failing never reached Amy, and when the next found her, the grass was green above her sister. The sad news met her at Vevey for the heat had driven them from Nice in May, and they had traveled slowly to Switzerland by way of Genoa and the Italian lakes. She bore it very well and quietly submitted to the family decree that she should not shorten her visit, for since it was too late to say goodbye to Beth, she had better stay and let absence soften her sorrow. But her heart was very heavy. She longed to be at home, and every day looked wistfully across the lake, waiting for Laurie to come and comfort her. He did come very soon, for the same mail brought letters to them both, but he was in Germany, and it took some days to reach him. The moment he read it, he packed his knapsack, bade adieu to his fellow pedestrians, and was off to keep his promise, with a full heart of joy and sorrow, hope and suspense. He knew very well, and as soon as the boat, Vevey, or whatever that place is, very well, and as soon as the boat touched the little Quay quay, he hurried along the shore to Latour, where the Carrolls were living on pension, I guess. The Gargan was in despair that the whole family had gone to take a promenade on the lake, but no, the blonde mademoiselle might be in the chateau garden. If Monsieur would give himself the pain of sitting down, a flash of time should present her. But Monsieur could not wait even a flash of time, and in the middle of the speech departed to find Mademoiselle himself. A pleasant old garden on the borders of the lovely lake, with chestnuts rustling overhead, ivy climbing everywhere, and the black shadow of the tower falling far across the sunny water. At one corner of the wide, low wall was a seat, and here Amy often came to read or work or console herself with the beauty all about her. She was sitting here that day, leaning her head on her hand, with a homesick heart and heavy eyes, thinking of Beth and wondering why Laurie did not come. She did not hear him cross the courtyard beyond, nor see him pause in the archway that led from the subterranean path into the garden. He stood a minute, looking at her with new eyes, seeing what no one had ever seen before, the tender side of Amy's character. Everything about her mutely suggested love and sorrow, the blotted letters in her lap, the black ribbon that tied up her hair, the womanly pain and patience in her face. Even the little ebony cross at her throat seemed pathetic to Laurie, for he had given it to her, and she wore it as her only ornament. If he had any doubts about the reception she would give him, they were set at rest the moment she looked up and saw him. For dropping everything, she ran to him, exclaiming in a tone of unmistakable love and longing, "Oh, Laurie, Laurie, I knew you'd come to me." I think everything was said and settled then, for as they stood together quite silent for a moment, with the dark head bent down protectingly over the light one, Amy felt that no one could comfort and sustain her so well as Laurie, and Laurie decided that Amy was the only woman in the world who could fill Joe's place and make him happy. He did not tell her so, but she was not disappointed, for both felt the truth, were satisfied, and gladly left the rest to silence. In a minute, Amy went back to her place, and while she dried her tears, Laurie gathered up the scattered papers, finding in the sight of sundry well-worn letters and suggestive sketches good omens for the future. As he sat down beside her, Amy felt shy again and turned rosy red at the recollection of her impulsive greeting. "I couldn't help it. I felt so lonely and sad and was so very glad to see you. It was such a surprise to look up and find you just as I was beginning to fear you wouldn't come," she said, trying in vain to speak quite naturally. I came the minute I heard. I wish I could say something to comfort you for the loss of dear little Beth, but I could only feel, and he could not get any farther, for he too turned bashful all of a sudden and did not quite know what to say. He longed to lay Amy's head down on his shoulder and tell her to have a good cry, but he did not dare, so took her hand instead and gave it a sympathetic squeeze that was better than words. "You needn't say anything. This comforts me," she said softly. "Beth is well and happy, and I wouldn't wish her back. But I dread the going home, much as I long to see them all. We won't talk about it for now, for it makes me cry. And I want to enjoy you while you stay. You needn't go right back, need you?" "Not if you want me, dear. I do so much. Aunt and Flo are very kind. But you seem like one of the family, and it would be so comfortable to have you for a little while." Amy spoke and looked so like a homesick child.